That really kind of rolls right into the next topic, which is gold and what's been happening since, the Federal Reserve did the rate cut. Can you enlighten us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so deep knowledge investing, we have owned gold since 2020. It has been a hugely profitable position. I believe gold is up about 30% this year, which is well ahead of the S&P 500 at about 21%. Um, and historically, gold tends to do well in a declining interest rate environment. There are a couple of reasons for that. One is gold has no yield, and that's fine. It's not supposed to. It's supposed to hold purchasing power. Um, but when you compare it to owning dollars and the benefit to owning dollars are high interest rates, you think, oh, well, maybe I'd rather own gold than the dollar. But if I can get paid enough to own the dollar, then you do that. There's some level, there's some price level or dividend yield that you would receive, not a dividend yield, a bond yield rather, um, where you would rather hold the dollar over gold. And as interest rates come down, that makes that relative yield, that advantage of gold, sorry, the so the dollar over gold, it declines. And so that's the key point there. As those yields come down and you end up with more inflation, it causes people to say, hey, wait a minute, I'm not getting paid as much to hold dollars. And when this bond matures with more inflation, the value of what I receive at the end of the duration of this bond is not going to have the same kind of purchasing power. So people are making the choice to own gold. It's not a coincidence that right at the point that the Federal Reserve has pivoted to lowering rates, that gold is hitting all-time highs.
So it does beg the question, though, basically you've got geopolitical concerns that may have an effect. I mean, what are the effects?
So, Howard, that's a great question. And one of the things that we want to do is talk about gold has it's for thousands of years it's been considered a safe haven. Right now, the world's reserve currency is the dollar, and anytime there's conflict all over the world, people have flooded into the dollar. It is a little bit different this time because foreign countries are largely turning to gold right now. And so let's talk about what's going on. First of all, we have a huge amount of geopolitical conflict. The war between Russia and Ukraine is threatening to involve NATO. Um, Putin has threatened to turn it into a nuclear war. It seems like it was the U.S. Navy that may have cut the gas pipelines between Russia and Germany. I mean, there's a lot going on. There's also an active war going on in the Middle East right now, which has people worried about the cost of energy, among other things. This could turn into a wider regional conflict. And so all of these things happening make people more interested in gold. Now, one of the places where the United States has made an error, and we've talked about this at length, it was in the sanctions against Russia when Russia invaded Ukraine. And look, those sanctions were well meaning, and we're not against, punishing Russia. The problem is what the United States did is seized Russian dollar reserves. And the reason that seemed like a good idea is they're saying, hey, we don't want to let them use the reserves to wage war. The problem is that didn't hit Russia, it hit dollar holders, it hit United States consumers. And the reason for that is the whole world saw this and they said, wait a minute, the US is willing to use the world's reserve currency to prevent access to the system and seize the assets of anyone who is not in lockstep with the demands of Washington D.C. And you could say, well, hey, but we're the good guys. Why shouldn't people be in step with us? And the answer is because Washington D.C. is a place where political party control changes every 2 or 4 or 6 years or 8 years. And so we don't have a coherent foreign policy. And that's all right. Our system was designed to be adversarial. It was designed to prevent any one idea or faction from gaining too much power. Okay, fine. But the problem here is because the US government doesn't have coherent policy, we end up with a situation where it's very hard for foreign countries to remain in compliance with what we'd like. They don't like the idea that the dollar is being used as a weapon. And so not only is Russia now opting out of the system, we have seen massive amounts of gold purchases by central banks in India and China. And it's really easy to say, okay, but who cares? Well, the answer is there are 8 billion people on the planet, and almost 3 billion of them live in those two countries. These are both high growth economies they're growing really quickly. They're industrializing. And so for them to say, we don't want to hold dollars, we want to start to hold gold, is a negative for the dollar. The dollar has been losing share as the world's reserve currency. There were a ton of articles I saw on that over the weekend. It's something we've talked about both last year and this year. And all of this means, gold demand is continuing to increase, despite the fact that deep knowledge investing subscribers have huge gains in gold. It's been a huge profit producer for us. None of us are selling right now. We're all just holding. Gold is the kind of thing that you want to own long term. If you would have asked me 5, 6 years ago whether I would hold gold, I would have said, what, are you kidding me? No, never. But this is where we are, both in geopolitics and fiat currency. And so, it's important as conditions change for you to change your opinion. That's what we did about 4 years ago.